Hey guys, I'm Eugene Bach with Back to Jerusalem, and I'm coming to you live on delay from somewhere within the borders of Sweden this time. I got a message yesterday specifically asking about the situation in China with all of the natural disasters that's been taking place in the last month or so. And when I got the message, I saw that this might be something that the person that wrote to me has a question about, but maybe other supporters of Back to Jerusalem also have a question about. Because what you will hear from the mainstream media is probably going to be different than what I'm going to share with you. In fact, most of the people in mainstream media is probably going to tell you that the increase of natural disasters that we are seeing today inside of China is the result of climate change. Now, I don't know if I completely buy into that. I think that it's also the result of mismanagement of resources. You ever notice that the areas that are hit hardest by climate change are usually those that are living under regimes that are either Buddhist, communist, or Muslim? It's one of the things that it strikes me as crazy that when it comes to climate change, it's Christian nations that have to give money to non-Christian nations because they're having a problem with climate change. One of the challenges that I have about that, with especially as it relates to China, is that China has shot themselves in the foot. And what I'm going to share with you is something that you're probably not going to hear anywhere else. In 2017, you can look this up. This was kind of big news. We shared about it, but I think a lot of people have forgotten about it, and understandably so. I mean, it's been 9 years ago. But in 2017, China passed a specific law regulating NGOs. Now, a lot of NGOs were going gangbusters since the 1990s inside of China. A lot of NGOs found opportunities to work inside of China. And there was a lot of things being done by great NGOs throughout all of China. Around 2010 to 2015 is when China really hit its peak, with like more than 6,000 NGOs registered inside of China, working inside of China, and even more NGOs that had representation with someone else that was already registered, but they were going by a different name outside of China. I know a little bit about the NGO work because I've been doing it since '99 inside of China. In fact, we still have an NGO that operates inside of China, which is not easy because in 2017, China woke up. And their leadership started looking around. And what they saw was the largest revival in the world. Now, it is against the law to evangelize. And it is against the law to share about the good news of Jesus Christ with anyone under the age of 18. So, if Chinese are abiding by these laws, there shouldn't be any new Christians. If you're not evangelizing and you're not preaching to the children, that means that Christians are getting older and older, and then they soon die out, and the Christian population gets smaller and smaller and smaller until finally it evaporates, right? That's what China's been hoping for a very long time. When the persecution didn't work, when the re-education camps didn't work, then they put in these new laws hoping to choke out the church. But what they noticed in 2017 was that the number of Christians in China is exploding. It's doing the exact opposite of what they thought should be happening. And so they started looking around, asking, why is this going on? Why are there so many new Christians? And they were looking for someone to blame. One of the people that they blamed were NGO workers. What they saw with NGO workers is that NGOs were willing to go into the remote areas of China and work with those people that had been left behind by the government, especially in Western China. So if you look at the Christian centers today, many of them outside of Henan province, you can find, like if you go into Yunnan, Guangxi, you'll find minority tribes, almost entire minority tribes that have become Christian. And a lot of that has to do with the efforts of Christian NGOs. One of the things that we did a lot, especially in areas like Tibet and Xinjiang, is we built schools and clinics and hospitals, trained doctors and teachers, built bridges, water sanitation projects to give water, clean water to people for the very first time in their villages. We did a lot of those projects over the years. And it wasn't just us. There were a lot of Christian NGOs out there. Now, the benefit of Christian NGOs is that they come and they don't charge anybody anything. They provide free workers. They provide free income. They provide free projects. So we built schools, didn't cost the government anything. We trained doctors and teachers, didn't cost the government anything. We built clinics and hospitals, didn't cost the government a single penny. But that was having an influence on the people, and they knew it. One of the other things that was happening in China is that you had these big English organizations. China had a big push, especially prior to 2008. They had a big push for English as the second language. And Chinese pay levels were not very high. So the only people crazy enough to come and teach English in China in the early years were mainly Christian. There were a few oddballs that were willing to go for the experience and teach English, even though they weren't Christians or they weren't doing it for Christian reasons. There were a few of those. But the overwhelming majority of those that were going to China and teaching English for free were Christian missionaries. Christian missionaries who saw it as a great way of opening the door to share the gospel with normal, everyday people. I remember when I went to university in China. When I went to university in China, we had English Corner. English Corner was like shooting fish in a barrel. I could go and sit at those English corners all night long, and just Chinese would come in from every direction, and they wanted to talk about everything. And one of the big things that they wanted to talk about was books. And most of my reading is Christian books. So I talked about the Christian books that I was reading, and it interested a lot of people, and a lot of people came to Christ from those English corners from the university. And I was just one person. There were people that did this all day, every day, throughout all of China. China had a lot of universities. Most of these universities, by the way, the best universities, were started by Christian missionaries. Today, the number one hospitals in all of China were started by Christian missionaries. So Christian missionaries have a history of benefiting the people of China, but also angering the spirits that have controlled China for generations. So when the Chinese atheist government began to look around and see the increase of the number of Christians, many of them blamed NGOs. So in 2017, there was a national security law that was passed that specifically targeted NGOs. And what happened is that the number of NGOs began to shrink. It went to from over 6,000, I believe now just over 600. So basically 90% of all of the NGOs that used to be in China just 9 years ago, gone. And many of them aren't returning back. Their ability, even the NGOs that are now there now, the ability to receive funding and use funding in China, it's almost non-existent. China came out with this new law for national security, and so they said that, we need to get a grip on these NGOs that could threaten our national security with foreign interests. And so with the foreign interests, they began to control bank accounts, control electronic communication, control access to different project areas, and control even the areas where NGOs were getting their main funding from. So all of that was controlled, and they were like, yeah, these are Chinese controlled NGOs, which is the opposite of NGO. NGO, by definition, means non-government organization. So an NGO that's controlled by the Chinese is a government-controlled non-government organization. It's an oxymoron. So what happened is there was a big sucking sound as NGOs were pulled out of China. So one of the things that we have seen as those NGOs have left China is there has been a human capital loss. A lot of the top experts that used to work in China for almost free are gone. A lot of those resources that China had on its way up to build up their economy, build up their agriculture, to build up their language, to build up their competition in the marketplace, gone. So now China's really seeing a challenge because 9 years after this new law, these massive disasters that are hitting China don't have anybody really there to help. Before, there used to be an announcement by foreign NGOs that were on the ground. Now, nobody's there. And if nobody's there to witness, nobody's there to hear. China is one of the most densely populated nations in the world. So there's people there, don't get me wrong. But the world's not hearing about it. So the world's not helping. And the world's not helping, the disasters are magnified. So when I get a question, how are the churches doing during these natural disasters? The answer is not good. The churches are able to help, and they're helping the best that they can. But the economy in China is in a nosedive. The unemployment numbers in China is skyrocketing. The Chinese economy is not good. You're just now hearing about that. Now, in 2020, I don't know if you remember, but in 2020, all of the mainstream media was saying, oh, the Chinese economy, look at the Chinese economy. They're doing really good. Even though they are on lockdown for COVID, we should follow the Chinese model. Lock everybody down and our economy will still grow. It went against all rationalization and it went against the facts, because when I traveled into China, even during COVID period, the one thing that I saw is unemployment numbers were out of control. The number of businesses that boarded up, and even to this day in 2026, have still not opened up. I have reported on this so many times, so I've shared about my own experiences inside of China. But it's not just my experiences. I had the opportunity this year to sit down with an economist professor out of Shanghai and listen to them share about their analysis of the economy inside of China. And it was a dire report. The situation is a disaster. And now with the NGOs that have been kicked out, the majority of them being Christian, the Chinese are really feeling the pain. In every way, it feels like things are going backwards. And they are. Why? I've talked about this many times. You can go back in our archives and find this in more detail, why I share about this. But whenever you persecute God's people, bad things happen. Whenever you bless God's people, good things happen to your nation. This is why we can look at the communist nation of North Korea and compare it to South Korea. One gives absolute freedom to Christians. The other one gives no freedom to Christians, persecutes Christians to the max. And then when we measure every single element of life in North Korea versus South Korea, it's not even close. When we look at science, North Korea is at the bottom. When we look at the economy, North Korea is at the bottom. When we look at education, when we look at the development of IT, when we look at medicine, when we look at leisure activities, in every single category, North Korea fails. South Korea, which is made up largely of Christians, and Christians have freedom of ministry inside of South Korea. Their Christians can freely minister, and they have thrived in South Korea. We see the exact opposite. In every single way, freedom of religion and free economies are linked together. When China chose to persecute their Christians, their economy went into nosedive, and now with natural disasters slamming their country, they don't have the proper resources to answer most of those disasters. That's information that you will not hear anywhere else. I just wanted to give an update for those that have been praying for the Back to Jerusalem missionaries and praying for the underground house church in China. We want to thank you for your partnership. Thank you for your prayers. And thank you for downloading this Back to Jerusalem podcast. I'm Eugene Bach, coming to you live from somewhere within the borders of Sweden. God bless.